it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Out of Bounds podcast. Nate and Josh here. It is time to break down everything Ryder Cup related. It was everything other than an American dream this past weekend, Nate. Holy cow, it was bad.
Wow. Yeah, it was not a good score. You look at the score, it's 16.5 and 11.5. So the Americans lose by 5. That doesn't tell the whole story, of course, as scores in sports don't usually. But it's just chock full of storylines, Josh. I'm so excited for this podcast. I had so much fun watching the Ryder Cup. It truly is a different form of golf to watch. There's so much emotion in match play, right? Both teams playing for their country. Some wish they were playing for money. We'll get to that. But playing for their country, the way the Europeans treat it, the way the Americans treat it is a lot differently than the way the Europeans treat it. We'll talk about that too. But it's just so exciting. It's the most fun golf event, I think, to watch that you can possibly have. Yeah,
it's incredible. And there were a lot of I think there were a lot of issues with the viewing experience if you were one of us sitting on a couch.
That too.
Watching it, but we'll talk about that more later as well. Why don't you give us a breakdown of how scoring fell for those who might have missed it? Obviously, we know what the final was, 16.5 and 11.5, but there were a couple sessions, I think, that stood out as straight up beatdowns that really put this thing out of reach for Team USA.
So Friday morning, we have a 4-0 European sweep. And I was so excited, obviously, as most USA fans were, or any fan for that matter, to watch the Ryder Cup. I woke up early, brewed a pot of coffee, got up about 4 or 5 Eastern time, and these matches were essentially over. And it was like, okay, this is 2 of them. I woke up, right around that time, and 2 of them were over, and the other 2 were close to being over. So 4-0 European sweep there. That was foursomes. Also, that's alternate shot. The Europeans have been very good in alternate shot in the last few Ryder Cups. Not a ton to talk about there. Go to the afternoon. Europe wins that session again, 2.5, 1.5. And Josh, this was the session the Americans looked like they had control. They were leading in 3 of the matches. The 4th match was the Matt Fitzpatrick show. He was 6 under through 6 on his own ball. So there was no way they were winning that match. And the other 3 matches they had leads in, and in all 3 of them, they either lost or tied on the 18th hole. So it was just really, really demoralizing. Jon Rahm knocked in about a 30-foot eagle putt in his match. Justin Rose made about a 20-foot birdie putt in his match. It was just unbelievable. If things go a little bit differently there, we might see it. Pretty crazy stuff on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, and Friday afternoon was when it looked like it needed to be like USA winning 3 or 3.5 points minimally. And
that if they were to win 2 or 2.5, like, it still would have been better. Like, they just got crushed in the morning and they needed to come back in the afternoon and win the session, but they didn't. So going into Saturday, similar stuff in the morning on Saturday was not as bad. 3-1 European favor. 1 match was bad. The worst Ryder Cup match in the history of the Ryder Cup. Scotty Scheffler, Brooks Koepka lose 9-7 to Ludwig Aberg and Victor Hovland. When I woke up, they were 8 down on number 10. And they finished that one out pretty quickly. Through 10 holes, Scotty and Brooks were 7 over par. That's not good.
Obviously, the imagery from that.
Scotty was crying after the match. Meredith Scheffler, his wife, was consoling him on the side of the car, rubbing his back, and he was crying. Very, very much, as I said on my TikTok, tough scenes. So we'll move on from that. In the afternoon, USA really made a push. They won that session, and they took 3 and 1 points on that one. Cantlay made a bomb on 18 to secure that last point, and that was huge for the Americans. That made it from a 7-point deficit into the 5-point deficit that we saw. And then on Sunday, it was good for the Americans. They, in the first few matches, Europe had some of their big guys go out, like Rahm and Hovland, and Scheffler ended up tying Rahm, which made it really big in that first match. It ended up being a 6-6 split by the time we're all said and done here. 16.5, 11.5 Europe. but it was close on that Sunday too at some spots. If US were to get it done and they were to get 14 points, it would have been the biggest comeback in Ryder Cup history. So hats off, as we say, to the Americans for getting that done, for trying to get that done, and they almost got it there, but just not quite.
Yeah, I mean, 6 points when you needed 8.5 means there were only a couple matches that needed to turn, and you're talking about a completely different outcome. But obviously was not the outcome, and Europe wound up essentially completely dominating. And we'll get into what that means and everything like that. But, on its face, I think when you look at the entirety of the week, you look at those two sessions where Europe goes 4-0, 3-1. And at the end of the day, every point is so important. You just can't if you're either side, you can't let more than one session go that poorly. I think that's kind of where the line is. In my mind, that's where the line in the sand is. Like you need
I mean, we're going to get into this too, but you just can't get blitzed in the first session. You can't get swept. The Solheim Cup, the Europeans got swept by the Americans and they ended up winning, which is kind of funny to say that you can't, but you can't just get totally blown out of the water in that first session. It's just hard to come back from.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, on the American side, Zach Johnson is going to be viewed as a big part of that failure. What do you think? What do you make of Zach Johnson as a captain? And what do you think as far as his decision making throughout the weekend?
A lot of people are calling him the worst American captain ever to be at the Ryder Cup. I am usually not wanting to give people those kind of terms, but he could be. I mean, based on his team selection, based on his pairings, based on his press conferences, based on his on the course kind of coaching, he gets very negative grades from me. That team selection we've talked so much about, Josh, he did bring Justin Thomas, and that was good that he did that because JT did play well. He did play, and I guess maybe not well, but good enough, I guess, then to try to get America to that victory. But bringing a guy like Sam Burns, who got absolutely just demolished in 2 of his 3 matches, he played well in the other one, but 2 of the 3 matches he wasn't there, and then no Brooks on Friday morning in the pairings, and we'll talk more about the pairings, Josh. I know you have some stuff to say about that, and they weren't good. I thought that wasn't very good, try to set the tone with one of your big guys like Koepka sitting on the bench. But just the biggest thing for me, Josh, was on Friday afternoon. It was the Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas match. They were 3 down with 3 to play, and they were on the 16th tee box. And we'll get into more about the course, but the 16th hole is one of the coolest holes in professional golf, in my opinion. It's a short par 4, about 290 yards, downhill a little bit. It's like an amphitheater style where the fans can get almost all the way around it, and they're really loud on that hole, and they can drive the green. So they're 3 down. They have to win the hole. I mean, this is a 290-yard hole that the Europeans are going to birdie. Between 2 players on their side, they're going to make a 3, and then you're done. If you make a 3, you're more than likely finished. So you got to try to make it 2, do something crazy, right? And Justin Thomas hit and he missed the green, and Jordan Spieth's about to hit. He has a driver out, and it looks like Zach Johnson walks over and talks to Jordan Spieth. And I don't know what was said in that occasion. We're never going to talk about it. It's in this little tiny conversation there. Jordan Spieth goes back to the bag, takes out his 3-wood, hits it in the water. And so the match is essentially over, right? You need someone to stud up in that opinion. So later in the day, Zach Johnson said he didn't tell him not to hit driver. Who knows what he said, like I said, but that was really, really tough for me for Zach Johnson.
Yeah, you know what? I broke this down in pie chart form because I was trying to dissect the entire weekend, and I kind of put it in a 40-40-20 situation. So 40% of the blame goes to Zach Johnson and how effective of a captain he was. 40% goes to the players for just not playing well enough, and 20% goes to fate and timing with just the European players playing better, period. End of story.
Yep.
But
I like that.
When I think of that 40% that Zach Johnson had control over, man, he did nothing to help himself at all. And he didn't do anything really to help. When you think about what the U.S. team was able to accomplish, when it comes to how they were able to play through not a lot of hope, not a lot of inspiration, they did a lot of that in spite of him, because when he opened his mouth, he was the least inspiring person in Italy, literally the least inspiring person in Italy. And at the end of the day, when momentum is so important, and when, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the fiery back and forth stuff that happened throughout the event. When you're talking about something where personality and energy and how inspiring you are, when all that stuff matters so much, Zach Johnson just delivered on none of it. And we can criticize until we're blue in the face who wasn't brought, but at the end of the day, he had who he had. And when you're a leader, when you're the captain in that situation, you just have to do better. You have to say something that actually rallies the troops, even if it doesn't. It has to at least give the people listening the perception that it might inspire someone. And when we were listening to, like, you and I were texting about this, but we're seeing it on social media, we're seeing everything, like, it wasn't fooling anybody. It wasn't inspiring anybody. Everyone was seeing right through everything he said as just basically being a captain who was asleep at the wheel. It was embarrassing. For Team USA. It was embarrassing.
The worst part of me about it in the pressers for me was, in like going back to what you're saying about him just lacking inspiration, is on Friday afternoon after they get blitzed in the morning and then they lose 3 matches or lose control of 3 matches on the 18th hole. And he's talking about it after the way, and he says, "I'm proud of the way the guys played today and how they battled." Okay, Zach, you don't need. No one believes that. Not even any of the players are proud of the way they played. That's just kind of negative talk right there in my mind. I don't know. I can't understand why he said that.
That is just saying something to say something because you don't know what else to say. And that's just kind of it. One of the things that's going to be talked about a lot here, I think, with Team USA is the time off element. Obviously, we saw the European players playing right up until the event, right up until the Ryder Cup began. Team USA, on the other hand, really, we hadn't seen most of them other than a couple of them since the FedEx Cup playoffs ended. Too much time off for Team USA, and how much of an impact do you think that actually had on the outcome?
9 players for Team USA haven't played competitive golf in 5 weeks. Josh, has there ever been a major where players don't play competitive golf? Maybe not the week before, maybe 2 weeks before seems to be a good thing. 9 players not playing for 5 weeks doesn't seem good, in my opinion. But at the end of the other side of the coin, over for these European guys, their like flagship tournament, the BMW PGA Championship in Europe at Wentworth, is one of their flagship events, and they played at all of them, and they all played well in it too. So I give them a little bit of pass. The PGA Tour season ended 5 weeks ago. That's where these guys played last, and it ended at the Tour Championship in Georgia. So it makes sense that maybe all 12 of these guys shouldn't play at Napa last week at the Fortinet. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I know in my brain that if you're going to talk to any major champion or anybody contending for a major, they're not going to take 5 weeks off for playing competitive golf.
Yeah, the only thing for me is I'm not really sure what it changes if the American guys were playing further into September or further into the fall. This really reinforced my overall take on the state of professional golf, which is that it just isn't as deep as we constantly talk about it being. We see a lot of really high skill, high talent guys ebb and flow, where for a 2 or 3 month stretch, they are untouchable. They are unbeatable. They're gods among men. I'm talking about John Rahm. I'm talking about Scotty Scheffler. I'm talking about Max Homa. I'm talking about Rory McIlroy. I'm talking about guys on both sides. And we've seen it now for the better part, I'd say, of like 6 or 8 years. Dustin Johnson is another one that I think of that fits the bill here. Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, where they have good runs, they have bad runs, they have good runs, bad runs. At the end of the day, it's not going to change the who's hot at the moment. And that's kind of where this fell. Like, it just came down to all we've been talking about, all we've been hearing about for the last 45-ish days is that the European players were hotter and they were better. That's it. They were just playing better now. If this were held in, late January or February of this year, when Scotty Scheffler was untouchable and looked like he was going to run off one of the most incredible years ever, and Max Homa had won just a month prior, like, could be a completely different situation. But at the end of the day, we're left with what we have. And maybe it was because of play that these guys were able to get on a bit of a heater. And, like Ludwig being in the position that he's in right now, had this happened a month and a half earlier, maybe he wouldn't have played as well as he did. But man, did he take that momentum and run with it. I don't think it does anything that crazy, though. If we move the playoffs to a later point, I just don't think it makes a difference for the American guys. I think it really just comes down to who has the most players hot at that given moment, and that's who's probably going to wind up winning most of the time.
I would argue that it's more important that the captain knows how they're playing, because then he can formulate pairings. You're going to formulate pairings on that Friday morning, and you're putting together Scheffler and Burns, and you're like, oh, how are they playing? I don't know. They haven't played in 5 weeks. Who knows? If anyone that plays golf knows that your game drastically changes between 5 weeks, whether you're playing competitive golf or not, or whether you're playing PGA Tour 2K23, on your PlayStation 5, your game could change. And I just think that's so important for the captain side. I agree totally, Josh, with your argument there. But making pairings, it's just got to be so hard. You don't have any idea how these guys are gelling in the last few weeks.
Yeah, and can we also stop making pairings based on historical data from like 5+ years ago? Like the Jordan Justin pairing. Neither one of those players are what they were a few years ago.
And the Xander Cantlay pairing took a big hit too this weekend.
Huge hit. And at the end of the day, I think that's where you really, like, the captain really does need to have it together, like you said, because you need to be able to make those switches and you need to shake things up. One of the things that was starting to frustrate me as the weekend wore on was, after Friday, to not see guys who were playing well together or had seemingly picked up momentum. I'm thinking of the Homa Harmon pairing, to not want to break those guys up and try to spread that out around the team by, kind of putting the hot hands with maybe some of the cooler hands to try and invigorate this thing when you're down as much as Team USA was. All of that should have been on the table. And instead it looked like we saw the most conservative pairings you could possibly imagine. And because of it, I think that was a large part of why we got absolutely dusted. But again, that's on the captain. The captain has to do better than that.
And especially it's in that first match, right? It's in that first morning session where the first match out was Scheffler and Burns. And Scheffler's played in one Ryder Cup before. Sam Burns has never played in a Ryder Cup. And I don't know if Zach Johnson thought I brought Sam Burns for Scotty Scheffler. We got to put him out there. First session, we have to put him out there. And they got trounced. They got beat. And they didn't play that well. And all of a sudden you're down 4-0 in a hole. So I don't know why. And maybe this is hindsight 2020, but these two players, we spoke about them already. They didn't play well, but why not put Spieth and JT in that first match? They've played in away Ryder Cups before. They know what it means. They know what it takes. Maybe they lose still too, but it still sets a tone for me a little bit that, these are my guys that I know have played before and I can count on them. Instead of a guy like Scotty Scheffler, who's an incredible player, the number one player in the world and stuff like that. And with Burns, who can putt well and has putted well all year, it's just tough for them to be in that first match morning session, rip roaring, ready to go in front of that raucous Euro crowd. Yeah,
absolutely insane. Let's talk drama. We had plenty of that on and off the golf course. Hatgate. Cantlay apparently wanting to get paid. I say that apparently, we'll talk about this. I'll editorialize later. False report. We had fake news, apparently fake news. Give us the rundown how all this stuff broke down on Saturday, and then we'll get into talking a little bit about it.
Oh, let's talk about Hatgate now. First of all, before I start talking about Hatgate, I love that when anything bad happens, there's any sort of speculation about anything, I guess we call it something gate. Just come from Watergate, right? You have Watergate, you have Deflategate, now we have Hatgate. So I mean, there's a million more that have come up ever since Watergate. But let's get into it. Jamie Weir, Sky Sports, was an affiliate of Comcast, tweeted Saturday morning that the reason that Patrick Cantlay is not wearing a hat is because he wants to get paid. So he tweets that out and says there. Additionally, because of that, there's a fracture in the U.S. team room. So let's dissect that a little bit, Josh. Part of those are true. Patrick Cantlay wants to be played to play in the Ryder Cup. He's made that clear already. That's 100% true. It's coming out that Xander might feel the same way. I don't think that's crazy to think about that. But it's 100% true that Cantlay wants to play get paid playing the Ryder Cup. It's also 100% true that Cantlay doesn't wear a hat in the Ryder Cup. He didn't wear it on Friday. He didn't wear it on Saturday. He didn't wear it on Sunday. He didn't wear it at any time. He didn't wear a hat at Whistling Straits either. So that's something important that, in the President's Cup, he did wear a hat, and asked after the round on Saturday why he didn't wear a hat. He just said it doesn't fit. So I think that's a reasonable answer. It doesn't, everyone's heads have a different shape to them, right? Rory in the past has not worn a hat. He says it makes his head look like a pea pod or something. I can't remember the exact words he said, but there's been multiple guys that have not worn hats in the Ryder Cup. So it's a little bit outlandish for Jamie Weir to report that Cantlay is not wearing a hat because he wants to get paid. So that ensued, that, and then the European crowd picked it up. The 50,000 fans that were at the Ryder Cup picked it up. And then every time Cantlay goes by them or on a hole or whatever, they're waving their hats at him, right? Taking their hats off and they're waving them at him. And this, obviously, you're watching it as Patrick Cantlay or his caddy Joe LaCava, who we're going to talk a lot about, and you're getting a little bit mad, right? This can be a little bit bothersome to you. So we get to 18. Patrick Cantlay knocks in, like I said earlier, a long putt to win the match. Does a big fist pump, and Joe LaCava is there on the green waving his hat around, like mocking the European fans. Some of the American players are watching the event. They're all doing the same thing, waving their hat around. So Joe's waving it around like he's at the rodeo on the putting green, and Rory McIlroy has a putt to tie the hole. A little, obviously shorter than Patrick Cantlay, and Rory's doing his pre-shot routine where he's walking around his line. So he's nowhere near his direct line, but he's walking around the green to just survey his putt. And if you watch the video or the picture, they kind of, not collide isn't the right word, but they kind of cross paths. And Rory has enough room to go around him, but he takes advantage of Joe whipping his hat around and doesn't like it, and tells Joe that he doesn't like it. And they talked about this on the 18th green after McIlroy and his partner both missed their putts. So we feel like this is all done. They hug it out. We always see this in golf where they kind of get mad at each other, but it's over quickly. So we think this is over, right? And this is an awesome story flying through the golf Twitter and golf X, right? About how much fun this is when people yell at each other like this. And then it comes out that in the parking lot, when they're leaving the golf tournament, Rory is hot. Rory is mad, and he's yelling at it's Bones. He's yelling at Bones. Justin Thomas is his caddy, not his longtime caddy, but his caddy. And we can't figure out why Justin's mad at Bones directly, because Bones wasn't involved in the situation. It's unclear whether Bones was involved or if he was just kind of the punching bag at that time. But Rory was so mad, Josh, that Shane Lowry, who is a guy that yells a lot and gets mad, had to pull Rory back and get him in the courtesy car. So it was just a crazy scene where Rory is seen pointing and screaming. And if you're a good lip reader, you can read that he says, "This is an effing disgrace." And he's saying that to Bones. So definitely a wild scene at Marco Simone after that round, but it was awesome. And now we're always going to have Hackgate. Josh, knowing what you know about the situation, let's start with who was in the wrong, and just I'd love to know what you think about this and kind of your thoughts on it as well.
I mean, look, on one hand, I get it. Caddy shouldn't interfere, right? Like, we understand that. But at the same time, I can't help but think that there must have been something else that happened somewhere along the line here between the 18th green and that parking lot incident to prompt whatever Rory was losing his mind about. And I don't know what it is. We may never know what it is, honestly. But I think it's interesting. I'm not sure that they're the same thing, honestly. I really don't. And all I can think is Joe was in the wrong on the 18th green. Rory was definitely in the wrong in the parking lot, getting caught doing what he did, which if you're Rory and you're for the last 2 years now, he's been the calm, reasonable one through all this live stuff, even though we know he has feelings about all of these things, and he's tried to be measured. And when he takes a jab, it's a very smart and very seemingly planned shot. To see this, it just basically looked like a meltdown. Looked like he was having a meltdown in a parking lot, like, a couple jerks after a charity scramble at a local muni. Like, that just is not what we expect out of, a former number one in the world, and also the guy who's, been player commissioner now, I guess, of the PGA Tour for the better part of 2 years. Just not acceptable. I'm curious if this has any spillover effect onto Rory's the way Rory is perceived by fans and how he's received by fans moving forward. I understand that this is the Ryder Cup, and I think a lot of golf fans appreciate and understand the fact that this is the Ryder Cup, and passion is important and everything like that. But this feels like it went a bit beyond golf, and it feels a bit like it got personal in a way that I don't think just good old fashioned, battling out does or did. So that's kind of where I leave that. And I'm curious to see how this plays out moving forward.
At least added some fire to the Ryder Cup. Cantlay making that putt, like I said, was huge. They would have been down 7 if he didn't make that putt, and they end up losing the hole. And coming back from 7 points down is never been done before either. And so as 5, but 7 is next to impossible. 5, you can do it, I guess. They almost, and they had a chance to do it. But with the thing with Rory though, I agree with you. Joe LaCava's in the wrong. He shouldn't interfere. He's a caddy. He's not a player. But going back to Rory, we've seen Rory do some outlandish celebrations on rories in Ryder Cups and 4. And he does it a lot of times when there's still putts to be had on the hole. And this was the same thing with Cantlay and Joe LaCava. Rory McIlroy has done some intense screaming and fist bumping and stuff when there's still putts to be made. So I think Rory's got to kind of take it in stride a little bit, take a little bit of your own medicine a little bit here. And it's just the end of the day, this is the Ryder Cup. It's just different. You're never going to have this in a PGA Tour event. We rarely even see a fist bump when a guy wins a golf tournament for the first time ever. So it's like you just have to take it differently. The emotions are running high, like you said, passion's running high. I think Joe LaCava's in the wrong, but I think Rory should have taken it a little bit more in stride.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. What about let's touch on the Cantlay stuff, the Pat Cantlay stuff, false reporting, that narrative. What's your take on that?
So we should start by saying, Cantlay obviously wants to get paid for the Ryder Cup, but I think it was Brandel Chambly reported that, and they don't get any direct money for the Ryder Cup, but 20% of the TV revenue goes to the PGA Tour, and then they can do what they want with it. Also, each player gets $200,000 to donate to the charity of their choice, and a lot of other proceeds go to like the Junior Ryder Cup and a bunch of all their youth golf initiatives. So the money's going to a pretty good spot in a lot of cases. But the Cantlay and now looking like Xander is arguing that they should get paid directly for this, Josh. And I don't know where I stand on it, because the Ryder Cup has historically been, a place of pride and wanting to do it. But in this day and age we are now, especially with the PIF and the Saudis, money talks and money's everything. I don't know if they should be paid, because I think if you start to have a scenario where guys get paid, then you're getting a little tricky with your captain's picks, right? Things can get a little bit murky there. But I don't think I blame Cantlay and Schauffele for wanting to get paid and having that sort of thoughts. What do you think?
I agree. Not getting, I'm not going to tread too much into the whether they should be paid or not debate, but, listening to Azinger, basically rant and rave about the Jamie Weir reporting on Saturday, as it being false or fake. It just continues these tropes about journalism in general. It's just incredibly exhausting. As someone who is a journalist, it's incredibly exhausting, because at the end of the day, we still haven't seen anything that's verified what Weir reported was fake. In fact, with the Schauffele stuff, it looks like it's been verified. So, they have the same employer when push comes to shove, NBC and Sky Sports. They're both owned by Comcast. Calling it clickbait, just parroting whatever the captain tells you, or whatever the official source tells you, or whatever the government agency tells you, is not journalism for Azinger or anybody else who thinks that that's what journalism is. It's about asking questions. It's about talking to people, and sources don't always want to put their name on things that they're saying. Now, that's a whole debate in and of itself. Should you publish something that doesn't have a name, a person attached to it? I don't know. But with the way we throw vitriol around on the internet, with the way we attack people who we don't agree with, I can certainly understand why some people are leery about about putting their name on certain things when they're talking to a reporter, when they're talking to a journalist in this in a situation like this one. At the end of the day, though, it just goes back to Zinger. You didn't like it because it didn't fit the narrative that you wanted to see play out in this Ryder Cup. I think there are a lot of people that make up the old guard of the PGA Tour that are very frustrated that so much of the emphasis is on money. And at the end of the day, we're going to see a lot more reporting like this because that's where the current players are taking it. The current players are the ones that are taking it in the direction of money is the only thing that matters. It kind of marries up pretty well, in my opinion, to America, period. Like, money is the only thing that matters. Money is the only thing that drives anything. If it isn't financially feasible, you don't do it. Look at what the PGA Tour is having to go through. We're going to inevitably see some form of private investment or a merger with the PIF, which was viewed as completely unacceptable a couple of years ago, because if not, the PGA Tour will simply not be able to continue existing the way it has now for 2 consecutive seasons. Sorry, that's just a fact. So when we're throwing around, shit like fake news and clickbait and fake reporting, when you're a 70 or 75-year-old just sitting up in the booth, just going from event to event, saying the same 42 lines over and over again as your color commentator on NBC, the worst broadcast in the history of broadcasts, I guess it just sort of like fits the bill. Like, keep doing it. Keep yelling at the clouds, old man.
Wow, that was a lot, Josh. I think a lot of it's right, though. It's the only thing that I don't like is just there's no way that's true. There's no way that Cantley's not wearing a hat because he doesn't want to get paid. 99% of what Jamie Weir said is probably true. I think he doesn't wear a hat. Like, that's just like, I mean, I don't think he would be that petty to do that. He declined it, so we're never gonna figure out the truth behind that. With this Xander thing, it was come out by his dad, Stefan. And if you know Stefan, he's a loose cannon with his takes. He just fires them out to anyone that's listening. He just
says it. And I love that because it's just so in your face and honest. Like, that's what we need. So
that's why European reporter is reporting it today, but because he's just firing it out. But like, it definitely shows the fracture in the US room because they don't think a lot of the times. I can bet you there's some guys in that room like Max Homa who doesn't need to be paid, who just wants to do it on passion alone. And I would say 12 out of the 12 Europeans don't really care about getting paid. So it definitely shows that there's some fracture in the United States the way they approach the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about TV coverage. If you're giving it a grade, what are you giving? Let's go back to school. What grade are you giving NBC for their coverage of the Ryder Cup this year?
Probably in the C range. There was a lot of commercials. I saw Tony Finau hit the range machine that the U.S. Bank ladies in, and they make the sand wedge joke. I saw that commercial like 100,000 times, and the Wagoneer commercial with the person singing, I saw that 100,000 times. I think I had that song stuck in my head for like a day after hearing that so many times. A ton of commercials, which we complained about already. Playing through it is a little bit of a joke. Especially when a match is in a pivotal time and we flip to playing through. That's tough. But we've talked about that a lot. The thing that I have a problem with the most was on Friday. There was the pivotal afternoon where the Americans looked like they were taking some matches in control, and they straight up lost the JT Spieth match, which was the closest one because the first 2 matches, Homa, Harman, Burns, Morikawa, they both had their matches in control. They're both 4 up at one point, and they showed every single shot from that match, and they were on the beginning of their back 9, and it was just like, okay. I've seen a lot of Max Homa today. He's playing well, but I want to watch Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas. I want to watch Jordan Spieth not be able to hit a fairway with a broomstick on Friday afternoon. So it was tough. We didn't watch that at all. I had to go on my phone and go to live scoring and figure out what was going on in those matches. And that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have to have people, going online to try to figure out what's going on. Josh, what was your thoughts on the TV broadcast as a whole?
You know what? As a Sunday ticket holder,
what's your grade? Oh yeah, the grade. We're going back to school.
It's a C minus, and that's as good as I can go on it. It wasn't any worse than any other like NBC golf production I've seen this year. I think it just felt worse or looked worse because there was so much less golf being played overall. So like you felt like there was it felt more egregious, I guess would be the way to put it. Because it's like during a normal event where you have 100 or 120 guys playing, it's easy to say, well, I haven't seen so-and-so in, a while. Well, when there's only like at any given time,
there's 8 balls in play. There's 8 balls in play.
You've got like 4 matches happening at once. Like you should be able to see most of the shots.
And foursomes, there's even less play. There's even less play in alternate shot.
Yeah. As a Sunday ticket holder, I would love to see something a little more innovative done with the broadcast where, since everybody is using, for the most part, using smart televisions, I'd like to see something where you can flip between matches and be able to actually see all of the matches happening at the same time, kind of like quad box style. Figure out if you need to throw a sponsor on it or whatever the case may be, do it. Title sponsor, I don't know, like a billion title sponsors, whatever it takes. But the playing through thing is horrendous. I think it's just a turn off. And I'm not really sure who would be satisfied with what they saw. Like, even if I think of older TV consumers who I guess maybe would be in NBC's breadbasket with their main clientele, I don't think they would have even been like, oh yeah, that was a standout broadcast over the weekend. Just didn't do anything.
Yeah, if they go on X.com, they know that people didn't like it. And X.com has been really showing that they don't like these golf broadcasts and they don't really change that much. So they must have lost or forgot their password to Twitter. So going on to that final Sunday, Josh, you were too busy running 26 miles for some reason. And then that Sunday finish, it came down to the end, towards the end of the matches. It was looking very slim for the Americans, but there was a path, like I said. So Ricky Fowler is playing against Tommy Fleetwood, and Ricky's, I believe he's 2 down going into that 16th hole. So he's 2 or 3 down. So he needs to try to win the hole to continue the match, win or tie the hole to continue the match and not go dormy. So he hits his drive in the water, which wasn't pretty on that 16th hole. He needs to try to hit it on the green. He hit it in the water. I don't have a problem with that. Bad shots happen, and that's that. Fleetwood ends up hitting his second shot on the green. He's got about a 20 or, I don't know, footer, maybe longer than that, maybe shorter than that, for birdie. Ricky gets up and down for 5 out of the water hazard and makes his bogey. So Fleetwood kind of lags his putt up to about 3-ish feet. It might have even been closer than that. 3-ish feet short of the hole. And nice guy Rick says, pick it up. You won the Ryder Cup. And I have a problem with that, Josh. It's not a putt Tommy Fleetwood's going to miss. He's not going to miss this 2.5, 3-footer, on 16, a pretty flat putt too, a real easy putt. He's not going to miss it. If he had it 50 times, he's going to make it 50 times. But I have a problem with the Ryder Cup ending on a concession. And it's definitely a little bit anticlimactic if you're on the Europe side, where a putt doesn't hit the bottom of the hole and then celebration ensues, right? So it was a little bit of a problem to me, because if I'm Ricky Fowler, I feel like he's saying, oh, I got to see that. He's not going to miss it, but it's just, you're there and you've put in all this time and effort and money to this tournament, and you just give it up. Like, it's a 2-footer, that's good. And you move on like you're playing Tuesday Night League at your local course.
See, that to me doesn't even strike me as off, because look, it was over. It was done.
Yeah.
Like, at that point, it was done and over with, man. Like, there wasn't any.
But show some fight.
They did, by showing up with a captain who just didn't care. A captain who is as bland as this off-white wall behind me. Like, yeah, come on. Got to do better than that. Let's talk a little bit about why the U.S. is so bad at foursomes. Why are we so bad, Nate? Why do we suck?
I don't have an answer for you. Unfortunately, they've been really bad in Europe. Europe wasn't too good either. In America, Whistling Straits, they weren't really good at anything in that Ryder Cup. Pretty defeated, big fashion. You think about this Ryder Cup and what the score was. That one was even worse for the U.S. winning in that big win. But do they need to practice it, Josh? I guess this is like a question it goes back to that whole rest versus rust conversation that we already had about playing and stuff. Do they need to play on this golf? Do they need to somehow play the Italian Open that happened earlier in the year and try to get a feel for this golf course? Do they need to get there a couple more days before they did and play alternate shots together and play with a couple different partners? Do you think that would help at all?
I don't think so. You need to really have the team aspect down. I don't know
what the answer is.
You need to really have the team vibe down, because I think at the end of the day, that is what makes or breaks alternate shot, which is what we're talking about here. Teams just the team. I don't think the pairings were that good, and I think the pairings hurt a good chunk, right?
Right.
Like if you don't have that, if you don't feel good about the pairings, or if you don't feel good about your odds going into anything, you're probably not going to perform very well, right? That's just kind of a expectation.
Yeah. Just losing 7 points at Ryder Cup to this foursomes match it just puts you behind the 8 ball. I know that's low hanging fruit for me to say, but just going out and getting just bull rush in that first session 4-0 loses the Ryder Cup, in my opinion.
It does. It absolutely does. No doubt about it. The answer, like we always say, Nate, is play better. Don't stink. Mm-hmm. Play better. MVP. Who is your MVP of Team USA?
MVP, I think pretty much everybody has the same MVP, and I think it's hands down Max Homa. He played the best in terms of the American players. The only one with a winning record all week. It's Homa for me. Do you have someone else that you want to shout out?
I would say I would give it to either Homa or Cantlay. For all the crap that Cantlay had to listen to over the weekend, and for as much criticism as he does get, and sometimes deservedly so, for being behind the scenes as money driven as he apparently is, at the end of the day, he played incredibly well. And what he did in that last match on Friday rather, was just consequential, important.
You have an LVP?
I don't. I actually don't. Like, I think the easy answer is Scheffler, right? Like it's easy to point at the world number one golfer and say, yeah, you just didn't play well. But at the end of the day, Scheffler, again, for better or worse, we've seen him kind of going through it over the last 3 months, trying to figure out how to start putting better. And, outside of that, I think he played about as well as you could have possibly objectively expected him to play.
My pick, I think I'm okay with saying it being Scheffler. It's just for this one statistic alone. He becomes the first player in Ryder Cup history to be the number one player in the world and to get blanked. Didn't win a match. And that's jarring. I mean, you need your number one player in the world to go out and win a match. And I know he had to play Rahm on Sunday, and that's really tough. And, it's really hard to beat John Rahm. He ends up tying him. He needs to go out there and win that match. He's one up going down 18 and ends up losing 18. And if he wins that match, Josh, I think it juvenilizes the rest of the group, because they're able to look up that leaderboard and see red at the top of it. And it puts Will in some of these bottom guys, into Ricky Fowler, into Jordan Spieth, into Justin Thomas, in some of these other younger players too, like Sam Burns, who was getting just drummed by Rory McIlroy. But there's some other players back there that, they're seeing the red color up there, not, the neutral gray of Tide, and saying, oh, we can do this. Our big guys are coming through for us, and they're putting us on the map and giving us a roadmap to this. And I think it's just being able to win that final match, or that first match on Sunday, Scheffler, if he's able to do it, I think it might go differently, because that's just such a confidence booster.
Yeah, I don't disagree that it could have had a different impact if he hadn't gotten absolutely annihilated in all of his early matches, especially the most important. But also, let's not forget, this goes back to what I said in the beginning of the show, which is that at the end of the day, the game of golf, professional golf, is not as deep as we often hear it talked about as being. Victor Hovland is the best golfer in the world right now. John Rahm might be one of the best golfers in the world, but again, I'd put him in the same category as Scheffler and McIlroy, who have had great runs, and they're great players. But we don't live in this world anymore. Like, the Tiger era is done. We don't live in this world anymore where there's this black and white winner and loser, number one in the rest of the field and the rest of the world. And, to expect the kind of dominant performance out of a number one that we saw for the better part of 20 years out of a Tiger Woods when he was number one. Just, I know he didn't have the greatest record, but I think in golf in general, we have expectations of a world's number one that just aren't fair of a world's number one. Good, bad, or indifferent. What about the Euro side?
Now that you mentioned Tiger, though, I got to ask you, are you going to let him take the team over in 2025 Bethpage Black? Are we going to give Tiger the captaincy? Sorry to go off script here.
I wouldn't mind it. Like, I want somebody who can at least, I think you need to have one of two things. If you're going to be a really good captain, you either need to be really inspiring or you need to be as respected as you could possibly be in the game. You need to check one of those two boxes. Agree?
Yeah, it's fair.
I think he checks both of those boxes. I mean, historically, one of the two best players to ever play the game, right? And he obviously has the respect of the players. I think it would be a good captain. I think at the end of the day, that's what was missing with Zach Johnson, and at least part of the reason why we saw what happened. Before we switch on that, though, I'm curious. Did you have an MVP on the Euro side?
Oh, on the Euro side, it's got to be Rory. I mean, he won 4 matches, played all 5. Only 2 guys on the Euro side played all 5, him and Hovland. He won 4 of them. He has this big stink on Saturday that we already talked about. Energizes that European side, which is something we didn't talk about. Really pumped up that European side. That one of their de facto playing captains in Rory McIlroy is screaming in the parking lot when they're up 5 points. I think it does a little bit to your team that shows, let's go get this done. So I think it's Rory for me, and this is his best Ryder Cup he's ever played. He's statistically not been excellent in the Ryder Cup. He's been okay. He's not been excellent, and he was excellent in terms of his golfing ability this week in Rome.
He was undeniable, but I would also say that Aberg was also incredibly powerful and important.
That was really good.
I mean, look, like I would say, you could give it to Rory, and you could say like he was the most valuable player. Or you could look at the 3 guys who really outside of really hardcore European golf fans wouldn't have recognized those 3 players: Nicolai, Aberg, and Robert.
Big shot Bob McIntyre.
Yeah, like that was an incredibly powerful group to have ponying out there in the middle, and they got the job done in a way that I don't think really many people expected them to.
Yeah. And they got to find a way. I'm sorry to keep going off this, but they like Nikolai as a twin. His twin brother is Rasmus Højgaard, who's also a very good player. And Rasmus was at the Ryder Cup. He was watching the matches on I believe it was Saturday. And that's just really cool. I think the U.S. has got to figure out a way to get guys there that are other PGA Tour players and just in support. But Ludwig was very good. He was part of that historic beat down of Brooks and Scheffler on Saturday morning. But wow, Aberg is going to be a problem, or Auberg as they try to pronounce it on that broadcast. But he's going to be a big problem, big thorn in the side for the Americans for the next 15 years. This kid can play golf, and they think that he could be the best player in the world. And I don't think it's outlandish to think that.
I hope that by the time he's the number 1 player in the world, we've at least settled on one way to pronounce his name, so I don't have to listen to a broadcast, either PGA Tour Radio or any of the others, and hear 4 or 5 different pronunciations of the guy's name. I'm not saying I know the right one, but I would just like to hear one instead of a bevy of them, out of respect for the guy who clearly can play
I'm
golf.
mispronouncing Højgaard, but I know that's another one that no one can pronounce. I can't pronounce it from my side too, so I'm sorry, Nikolai. Sorry, Rasmus. They had them say their name. They had Nikolai say his last name, and it's just awesome because that different accent and the different language over there too. It's just so cool. I love hearing them say it.
By the way, fast forward 2, maybe 4 years, the European team could potentially have 2 sets of brothers on it. Would be wild.
Mm-hmm.
Would be wild. Fitzpatrick brothers being the other.
Another player that was at the Ryder Cup. Alex was there. Matt's brother.
Yeah. Okay, so favorite moment. What's yours?
It's got to be Homa chipping in on 16 on Saturday, and he chips it, and he's got his hat off to shake hands with his opponent about the match being over before the ball is in the cup. What a baller move from a guy, Max Homa, who played just incredible all weekend. But he knows it's going and he takes his hat off. It's almost like Tiger and Abe Ancer. Remember that a few years ago in the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup, where he beat him in singles and people edited out where he just hits it and he goes and shakes his hand. But this was a chip. This wasn't a putt. This is off the green and from the rough where Homa hits it and he's got his hat off. Sorry if I took yours, Josh, but what do you have as a favorite moment? And there wasn't a lot of U.S. moments. Mostly the moments came from the European side. It
was that or the Cantlay putt. Obviously, awesome. I think both big. You know what? I'll switch to the European side and say that the Rose putt.
That was cool.
Was incredible. It was just obviously it wasn't great for Team USA. But if you're just
talk about me knowing him, he's going to make it. Justin Rose is not missing that putt. No shot.
Yeah, no.
I'm watching that like, oh my goodness, he's going to make it.
if you're a fan of golf and just great golf in clutch moments, it's hard not to just love that.
The Rahm Scheffler match was really good from a golf purist standpoint, back and forth all day.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, who is your pick for captain in 2025?
Either Tiger, I think he's the front runner. I think Stuart Sink would be a good captain. They might even go back to Steve Stricker, who was very good at whistling straights. But you got to remember with Stricker, he was in the ear of Zach Johnson a lot. And he did I had to bet he made some decisions and helped Zach Johnson through that. So you got to really take that carefully if you don't like Zach Johnson and then recommending Steve Stricker. That's a little bit two-sided there to me. But I think, going with a guy like Tiger would be awesome just to see Tiger leading the team. And how can you not get up for your captain being Tiger Woods? And I think there's a few other options that are good out there. But it's definitely interesting to see who's going to be the captain in 25 at Bethpage. I think it's more interesting to see who's going to be the captain at 27 in Ireland. I think that's going to be really big because anyone has a chance to win, even a really good chance to win at home in a Ryder Cup. Winning on the road is just so hard.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's Tiger, whether it's Stuart Sink, Steve Stricker, like you said, go dip back into the grab bag. Look, at the end of the day, something needs to change with who Team USA's captains are. And maybe the process needs to change, selection process for captains. I was thinking on my drive back home here this morning that maybe a term system would be better. So instead of doing like isolated captains picks, give somebody like Stuart Sink or Steve Stricker or Tiger Woods a 2 or 4 year term or a 2-event or 4-year term and let them kind of build a team the way a manager would build a team or the way a coach would build a team. Just being the captain of one isolated event that's 2 years away, there isn't really a whole lot in it. There isn't a lot of, you can't really get too into process. You're really only being the captain for the 2 months before the event while you're trying to figure out who's hot right now for the captain's picks and then the weekend of and not much else. So I think you build a little more into it. I think if you say, okay, Tiger is going to be the captain the next 3 Ryder Cups or Stuart Sink is going to be the captain the next 3 or 4 Ryder Cups and you build it out like that. And then you also don't get into a situation where you're just adding people in for the sake of adding people in or grabbing captains because, let's face it, sometimes I think the stock of potential captains is a little light.
What about Phil Mickelson?
Another one. Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think if you've got live players playing, you can't pretend, especially if we're going to see merger happen. You can't not have him be a captain. Right.
One thing about captains, though, we do have to give Luke Donald his flowers, Josh. He was incredible. He was a very good captain. And, he's in the ceremony on Thursday. He's talking in Italian and an Italian accent, too, and pumping up the crowd. Just every single thing he had to do was great. And this is coming, Josh, off the heels where Henrik Stenson was supposed to be the captain for Team Europe. And he ends up not being able to be the captain due to the live dispute. And so Luke Donald jumped into this at further into the game than maybe he should have. And he did all the right reasons, pulled all the right levers and got his team to victory. So hats off to Luke Donald.
If I'm European team, I'm asking him if he wants to come back.
Yeah. Why wouldn't
come back again? Come back. Yeah. Do it again next time.
Let's try to win America.
All right. Is Aberg? Hey, speaking of Aberg, he gonna win this weekend?
He is the favorite at the PGA Tour's second fall event at the Sanderson Farms Championship. That's in Jackson, Mississippi. Nikolai Holygaard is also supposed to be in the field. He withdrew today. I wonder why. It's not like he's celebrating winning the Ryder Cup. Aberg's the clear favorite. I think he's like 10-1. I would be surprised if, I guess he doesn't withdraw, but he hasn't done it yet. So I don't know what's going to go on there. But as of this recording here on Monday at almost 3 o'clock Eastern time, Ludwig Aberg is the favorite for the Sanderson Farms Championship.
If he plays, he's going to win. There, I said it.
That'd be cool.
All right. Hey, that's going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. Subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram for more content. And of course, if you're out there playing, you know the drill. Whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.